Event that's hosted in partnership with the Jane Hibbert Idema Women and Gender Studies Center, where we invite women from Aquinas and the greater Grand Rapids community to share with us their stories and the paths that led them to where they currently are in their careers or life. And today we have the honor to hear from Sister Maureen Geary. Sister Maureen is the 10th president of Aquinas College, and she has been part of the Dominican Sisters of Grand Rapids for the past 38 years. For 12 of those, she served on the Aquinas College Board of Trustees. She has also served Aquinas as an assistant professor and as a vice president of finance and controller. So please help me and give a warm welcome to Sister Maureen Geary.
Thank you, Esperanza, and thank you all for being here. How are we on volume? Is it coming through okay? Good. We're of all different heights, so I try to pay attention there. So, good afternoon. I am very honored to be with you today to offer one more chapter in the HerStory project. I want to commend the founders of the project and those who keep it going. Some of you may know I spoke at this a number of years ago. It's a marvelous way to learn through story, through different eras, through cultural circumstances, through engagement with each other. I'm not sure my particular story is all that interesting, but I've tried to throw in a few things that maybe a thread will pull you in. This is something like I experienced, or that's nothing like what I experienced. I wonder what that was about. So hopefully there's a little kernel in there for everybody, and maybe we'll start some good dialogue as well. I don't have any visuals today, only voice. Maybe a few word pictures as you imagine me or imagine yourself in the circumstances I'm going to describe. And I am going to wander around a bit, again, trying to think, well, how did that connect to that? And well, that followed, and that was before. And I think you'll just pick up some threads, probably. So I'm going to first focus kind of on the journey of my growing up. So what are my roots? What got me here? What formed me from all the way through college? And the second would be talking a little bit about my career, my life as a Dominican sister, my life experiences that bring me to today. And I invite you to listen with an ear for 5 themes: invitation, encouragement, I'll repeat them for you, challenge, opportunity, and grace. So you might want to jot them down, or 1 or 2 of them, or text them to yourself. I do that a lot lately. Invitation, encouragement, challenge, opportunity, and grace. And I'll call out some of those as I give some examples. As I prepared for today, those themes kept coming to me as elements of my story. And perhaps they're elements of your story too, and of the human story. So again, invitation, encouragement, challenge, opportunity, and grace. Speaking of story, I read a remarkable book this past spring while I was in Ireland, and I'll talk a little bit more about Ireland later. The book is called This Is Happiness by an Irish author named Niall Williams. It's the story of a young man who is restless in his seminary studies. He's trying to figure out who he is. And he takes a leave from his studies, which are on the east side of Ireland in Dublin, a big city, and he goes to spend time with his grandparents in the west of Ireland at a time when electricity had not yet reached their village or county, but soon would. That's kind of woven in the story. As he comes of age, he has remarkable insights, like this description of his grandfather. I'm going to read a little bit of a paragraph, but I'll emphasize a few phrases. So this is how, as a young man, he experiences his grandfather. He believed that human beings were inside a story that had no ending because its teller had started it without conceiving of one, and that after 10,000 tales was no nearer to finding the resolution of the last page. Story was the stuff of life, and to realize you were inside one allowed you to sometimes surrender to the plot, to bear a little easier the griefs and sufferings, and to enjoy more fully the twists that came along the way, So we're talking about her story. So story is the stuff of life. And realizing you're inside a story, we're all inside a story. They're intersecting today in this room, but they started differently. And maybe as we recognize we're in a story that I believe God wrote, we can surrender to the plot. We can find a little easier the griefs and sufferings and enjoy more fully the twists and unexpected turns along the way. So I realized as I look back on my life, maybe I'm approaching that place where I can sometimes surrender to the plot, reluctantly sometimes, bear a little easier the griefs and the sufferings, and enjoy more fully the twists along the way. And I think to be inside one story for me also captures the greater faith story in which I was raised and in which I believe. So one story is real, it's personal, and it's communal. I believe the African proverb, we see from where we stand. So some context to situate me might be helpful as you hear how I describe my story. Today I'm with you, as Esperanza said, as a Dominican sister of Grand Rapids and the president of Aquinas College. I was born in Grand Rapids. My father was of Irish descent and my mother of German descent. I'm told that makes for a good combination. My grandparents were also born here, and maybe that helps explain my initial preference for place over travel. I'm kind of rooted here. Even though, as you'll hear, my Dominican life has included much travel that has broadened my worldview. I've lived in Grand Rapids all my life, except for 10 years when I was away studying and in the novitiate of the Dominican Sisters. And each time I left, I came back changed, enriched, more committed to this life quest, standing in a new place, seeing from a new place. I'm one of 6 living siblings. My parents lost their second child at birth, 4 boys and 2 girls, so I was outnumbered. I was blessed with parents who sacrificed much for their children. Really, they were totally focused on us and our needs. My dad was a Catholic high school teacher, worked 2 jobs all his life because being a Catholic high school teacher doesn't let you provide very well for a family of 6. My mom worked in the home and from home until the youngest in my family went to reach school age. This will really date me, but some of you will know what this is. When she was working from home, she sold World Book encyclopedias. She did telephone surveys from a rotary phone up in the bedroom. You kids go to the dishes, I have to work for a couple of hours. And then became a teacher aide in what was then called special ed. I was the first girl, so a girl and the eldest of the second half of the family. So that means anybody who studies sociology, I am overly responsible. And I'm trying to be healed from that a little bit. I followed my older brothers and their pursuits, outdoors as much as possible, sports, and I was a voracious reader. I was a good student. Having parents in the education field kind of helps with that, I think, that and the love of reading. So also for me, a love of sports has been formative. I came of age just when it began to be possible for girls to have the opportunity to compete in sports, play other schools. Although for me, it's always been much more about the opportunity to play than to compete. I credit 2 coach mentors, grade school and high school for me when I was that age, for opening the sports doors for girls in the Catholic school system in Grand Rapids. Barbara Payton and Esther Meir both have gone home to God, but I think they opened those doors for girls, and I'll always be grateful to them. I benefited from team relationships and a sense of the whole relying on each other to contribute different gifts and work toward a common goal. And to tell you how much I loved it, Catherine has her eye on me for next summer, I continued playing summer recreational softball until I was getting too old to play. Mind you, I was not playing very well in those later years, but the weekly gathering with friends was special. Again, I'm giving you the early context here, bear with me. After high school, I went to the University of Notre Dame, which was sort of a family tradition, but I also wanted to go there. I was in the third class of women admitted to the undergraduate program, so had been an all-male school. My 3 older brothers had all gone there, my father had. I later learned that for many, many years, women had attended Notre Dame for graduate study, including many of the Dominican Sisters of Grand Rapids. So this is where I'm going to pull out a few threads. Might sound a little odd, but they were formative for who I am today. So just a couple brief glimpses here. When I was in college, the residence hall was really the center of life there. We didn't have fraternities and sororities. It was the residence hall. I lived in one hall all 4 years, which was kind of the tradition, and I never had a desire to move off campus. I think looking back, that was kind of a continuation of the closeness of my family of origin, then my college family, and now the community of Dominican religious life. Community matters to me, being one with others. I had the opportunity to participate in the band for all 4 years. I was in the marching band. I think I was the last one who made the cut, and then they had to keep me on, but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. I was an accounting major in a male-dominated university, a very male-dominated profession at that time. Not so much today. I have no idea where my desire to be an accountant came from. There aren't any others in the family, except a niece and a nephew who have now done that. And here's the little stories. The business courses there started when you were a sophomore, or your area of study, whether it was business, engineering, architecture, science, English. You started in your sophomore year. The freshman year was called the freshman year of study. Here we'd call it Gen Ed, where you took a lot of different requirements. But I have 3 particular memories about those business courses. In a sophomore management class, I had one of exceedingly few, to be exact, I think it was 2 female business professors. Again, Notre Dame was just opening up to the wisdom of women. Dr. Sandra Richards encouraged me to speak in class. She told me I had something to contribute. Who knew? I was dumbfounded. And at Dr. Richards' invitation, I began to find my voice. So it is that from my earlier 5 themes, invitation. Who might you invite to find their voice in this world today, in your world today? Secondly, Cost Accounting 201. Dr. Ray Powell was the professor, a former Marine, strict as they come. You did not mess around in Dr. Powell's class. Early on in the semester, I got paper back after a test. Top, it said 100%, A-. Speaking of finding one's voice, I went to see him. I'm sure that was his plan. I said, why an A- when it was 100%? He said, because I want you to speak. I want you to work with others. Maybe somebody next to you who's struggling with a C+, you could help them a little bit. So I began to do so. Maybe that's an example of encouragement. And who might you encourage? You have gifts. Use them. Share them with other people. They're not just yours to keep. They are a blessing, but they're not just for you. And the third example, in marketing, I don't really know if it was 201, but that's what I put down. Dr. Dow introduced me to my first experience of working in teams. Now, I know that's what you do today, but we didn't then. You studied on your own, you took your test, you got your grade, you moved along. But this was a team project. I still remember the 2 topics. Different parts of the semester, they're not related. We had to market Dream Whip. If you don't know what that is, go to the grocery store and look for it. It's still on the shelves. And we had to market Cessna airplanes. This required sharing tasks, negotiating where there was disagreement, in approach or in conclusion, and holding each other accountable. And I have no doubt that the outcomes were better than they would have been had we done each project alone. So, from my earlier themes, challenge, working with a group, and opportunity. And I would ask, what in life today needs civil negotiation, where we listen to differences and find our way through to a good outcome, good for all? And then a last example, not business related this time. As a junior, the junior year in accounting was a heavy year. We had 6 courses, usually 4 really heavy accounting courses and a couple of others. I took what today might be called a women's studies course, but I think then it was one of my English requirements. As I recall, again, I had a female professor. We read exclusively female authors. That was different. Looking back, I think this was my first awakening of feminism and a broadening worldview, questioning of systems, and wondering about the voices I was hearing or not hearing. Unlike any of my other classes at Notre Dame, because again, it was just opening up, most of the students in the class were female. But I would just comment, back then, as today, women's studies are human studies. Women's studies courses are for everyone. By paying attention to culture, including that in which I was raised, I do have a culture. It's not like everybody else has one, but I'm normative. I have a culture. By being curious and respectful, we are challenged to see through lenses that are not always given their due. So whose lenses might you put on today or next week and see something a little bit differently? My second area of focus today is going to be to comment a little bit, and I know I'm always running out of time, about career, community, and life experiences beyond these early years of study. My trajectory has been, in a word, unusual, and I will give a brief rundown of what happened after I earned a Bachelor's of Business Administration and Accounting and thought my life was set as a CPA. That's where I was headed. So indeed, and I'm just going to race through this so you get an idea of these crazy paths. I did 2 years in public accounting, 3 years in law school, 4 years practicing law in Grand Rapids. And interestingly, one of my first memories in that law firm was hearing the most senior partner who had represented a company for years and years and years, grappling with the ethics of legal representation the company was splitting. Should he represent one, the other, or neither? Because he had served the whole for a while. I just remember being intrigued. Ethics in every decision we make. In 1987, you did the math for me, Esperanza. I entered the Dominican Sisters. Then followed 9 years at Aquinas in different roles, teaching, financial administration, being on the cabinet. After that, I thought it's time for a little bit more study. So I went back to school in the late 1990s and studied for a Master's of Arts in Theology. Talk a little bit more about that in a minute. When I finished that degree, I came back to Grand Rapids, and I joined the Secretariat for Social Justice in the Diocese of Grand Rapids. I served as the Director of Programs, and it was an opportunity to put faith into action and to try to shape and challenge systems. From there, I moved on to 2 years as coordinator of the Grand Rapids Area Housing Continuum of Care. And part of our work there was crafting, dreaming, creating a vision to end homelessness. That vision is not yet realized, but it is a search that we all still need to be on to end homelessness. Following that, I served 18 years on the leadership team of the Dominican Sisters. 6 of those were as prioress, which is like the president of the congregation. Then, last year, I had a sabbatical year. Well, it was almost a year, because I ended up serving now as president of Aquinas College. But who gets a sabbatical year? So I was very grateful for the 10 or 11 months I had. So just racing through that, you probably didn't even follow most of it. Have you ever heard of the expression, "We plan and God laughs"? Maybe this lineup is a little evidence of the hand of God in my life, which I would call out as grace, going back to those themes. So as I, again, try to make sense of my life and how I got here and how I'm growing into who I am today and who I will be tomorrow, there's probably 2 big sort of career shifts that deserve a little more attention. One that I think about a lot is the transition from accountant to attorney. And I don't know if any of you have had the great delight yet of taking an accounting course, but in accounting, the debits have to equal the credits. At the end of the day, you get to go home. Well, sometimes you have to stay really late making it balance, but it does have to equal. There's not a lot of disagreement or argument about that. Once I got to law school, that certainty of there's always an outcome that's really clear was replaced with the Socratic method of learning, in which there is always another question, and you better be able to defend your answer. And I began to think, was law focused at truth, at getting the right answer? There's a law for this, we're going to get to the right answer. Or was it focused at winning the argument by being as persuasive as you could be? Now, an attorney is not permitted to lie. Literally, that is against the oath. You can't lie. When a case can reasonably be made, you test the reasonableness of your point of view, then you can argue from this point of maybe it's like this. Somehow this was very unsettling to me. I liked it when everything worked out really clearly. I think it forced me to be open to uncertainty, to outcomes I could not control, to mystery, and to continue in the pursuit of truth, as elusive as it might be. I did not like litigation, which I did very little of. I prefer to be able to be fully prepared. Having no PowerPoint, you can see I've not yet reached that point. And I've learned that that is simply not possible. In the art of improvisation, with study, confidence, humility, and trust, and making some mistakes is a great grace. Again, back to that term grace. It's a grace to not have to be certain, to not have to always be right. So the second big shift would be, it's not really a career exactly, it's a life, but joining the Grand Rapids Dominican Sisters. How did I leave accounting and law and become a sister? How did that happen? Saying it was my decision is taking liberties. It was a response to a call. I felt there was a something more. I distinctly remember my Aunt Elle sending me a card of congratulations, going about how wonderful that you're doing this and you chose this. And at the end she wrote, P.S., really? You didn't choose this, God chose you. And you listened. And I've carried that. So how to explain entering the congregation? A still small voice, a desire to be about something bigger than myself. My dad had died a couple years before I entered. That raised all kinds of questions. What mattered to him? What matters to me? What do I really want to be about? And thinking about Scripture, one of my favorites is I had a growing awareness that we are more when we're together than we are when we're apart. And that Scripture reading, put out into deeper waters, bigger fish are swimming there. Fill your nets to breaking and your boats to overflowing, caught me. Be a part of something bigger. So, connected with that life as a sister, I've had different opportunities of ministry. Service is a big part of that. And for me, service came to me from watching my parents, but also as I began in accounting and law, serving on boards was an expectation and an invitation and a challenge and an opportunity. And I have served on, I'm sure, at least 12, if not 15 or 18 different boards, from healthcare to like Aquinas, my high school alumni board, boards in housing, a board that serves women caught in domestic violence, D.A. Blodgett St. John's. Every arena which is new to me, I learn about how that works and who that serves and what a difference it makes. So I would really recommend one of our 4 pillars here, service. And in addition to where your own path takes you of career, be open to serving others and learning from others out there. One other specific piece that ties back into the religious journey was, actually this is before I entered the congregation. There used to be a congregation here in Grand Rapids and around the country and around the world, they still are around, the Little Sisters of the Poor. Their ministry is running nursing homes. And by this point, there were no more Little Sisters in Grand Rapids, and their home had been closed, but there was still a corporation here. And Bishop Breitenbeck asked me to serve on that corporation. Well, that kind of opened the door then to a new document that was circulating through the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, a pastoral letter on women in the church. And there was a large study program that went on in the whole diocese looking at women in the church. Ultimately, the document never got published, but lots of study happened, and I encountered a sister named Sister Phyllis Oren in that journey. Sister Phyllis was one of our dear Dominican sisters. Just listening to her, she had vast experience in church and in teaching and understanding the voice of church in the world, the importance of women in the church. hugely formative to me. And I know that was an element of ultimately, that still small voice saying, maybe there's something more than law. What else could you do with your life? So I did join the sisters. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit more, trying to think about some lessons here. So when I came to Aquinas, I started as a teacher. I had never been a teacher. I didn't have the advantage of our excellent education program here teaching me how to do a syllabus and look at my curriculum and all that. But I jumped right in and I made some mistakes and I learned a lot. And by the time I was teaching principles of accounting for the third or fourth time, I think I had a rhythm going. But what I really learned in that, I'm so glad I did the teaching, was how to be a better communicator, how to recognize you can come at a concern or a matter from different points of view. Different things will resonate differently with people. So I feel like I became a much better communicator through trying the art of teaching. And then a couple comments about where else has this journey taken me, kind of more broadly. Again, skipping ahead quite a bit. But when I left Aquinas, I had made my final vows, my final profession, my life commitment to the sisters, and I really wanted to deepen my study of theology. So I was given permission to study full-time for 2 years at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. That is an international school of ministry, serves men and women, men on the track to priesthood, women religious, laypersons seeking to serve in the church. It's really a wonderful institution. Our own Sister Barbara Reed, who is a Grand Rapids Dominican and serves on the Board of Trustees here, just finished 5 years as president of CTU. She is a scripture scholar, a world-renowned scripture scholar. And I'd recommend, if you're ever just kind of interested, I wonder what Sister Barbara might think about this gospel passage or that, reading from, she's a New Testament scholar. But Google her and find an article online. Talk about learning from a different lens. Sister Barbara is committed to finding the voice of women in the scriptures and in our faith story and helping us to hear the message of God, the message of Jesus with different ears, new ears. So one of the things I got to do at CTU was to spend 11 weeks studying in the Holy Land. We had 2 weeks in Greece and Turkey, kind of the lands of Paul, following some of the Apostle Paul's journeys, and then about 9 weeks just outside Jerusalem. We actually lived in the West Bank, in the Palestinian area. We walked across the border every day. We wanted to take a walk into Jerusalem. And my fellow students were from around the world. So a way to encounter the scriptures in the very place where Jesus walked, with people from different not faith traditions, but different parts of the world, it just opened my eyes. And when I hear scripture today, or when I'm invited to preach, I can come at it with not just this plain body and mind, but how I've been influenced by others. So I think that's a very important thing to share about worldview. And again, I'm getting older, so my life is getting longer, so I have to skip a few pieces. But a couple of the things I want to make sure I talk about. When I worked for the Diocese of Grand Rapids in the Secretariat for Social Justice, I did a lot with Catholic social teaching and really applying those principles across the spectrum of our life's journey. The dignity of life, care for creation, the rights of labor, the preferential option for the poor are just 4 of the 7, and I think now they might list 10. Back then it was 7. Those were all very appropriate learnings for a member of the Order of Preachers, which is what we Dominicans are. But I also want to comment on something else I learned in that ministry and my studies at CTU. I also came to appreciate and advocate for inclusive language. I read a really complicated book there called She Who Is by the theologian Sister Elizabeth Johnson. I really think I only understood one sentence, but it was a really important sentence, and it was this: the symbol of God functions. The symbol of God functions. We speak about God using symbols, using metaphors. Again, look at the scriptures. If we use only warrior symbols, we may perceive a warrior God. If we use only symbols of crushing power and banishment for transgressions, we may perceive a God who crushes. If we use only male symbols, we portray and image a male God. If we tell the stories of Jesus, we deepen our grasp of the importance of being seen. Again, the symbol of God functions. We can only approach God in language. We're human beings, and in visuals as well. What is the symbol? How can we open ourselves to more than one symbol as we try to grow in relationship with God? I just think that's so important. And my own little comma to that, I think you will find, I think I've finally got this down, how we image and speak of humanity. So you will hear me speak of humankind, not mankind, of humanity, not just man. I have nothing against males. I have 4 brothers. I loved my father dearly, but the power of language functions. So I think inclusive language is important too, because as we speak, who's hearing, you're welcome at this table, or who might be hearing, that one's not for me, that's not about me. So I just say language shapes everything. So as we communicate with each other, let's be mindful, whether that's across faith tradition or a person who does not have a faith tradition, whether it's across, in the English language, you don't have the same male and female designations, but just be mindful. Who would I like to hear my message, and how will they better hear me depending on how I present myself? So running out of time here, but 3 or 4 more things I just want to call out. My gift of serving the congregation of sisters with 18 years in congregational leadership, that's its own whole story, another time. But as I think about that, it was a privilege. And every gift I have, and many I wish I had, and I still haven't acquired, was needed in that service. Pastoral gifts, strategic planning, administrative, legal and financial, because we're a corporation. We care for each other with a common purse. The big picture, the small picture, getting paperwork done like powers of attorney and durable powers or health care preferences, and relationship. All of that is needed. That's transferable here to Aquinas College, so maybe I have a little bit to build on. And the other part about that work is I got to be a part of not only the Dominican Sisters Grand Rapids, get my geography, I think they're out that way, but also the Dominican Sisters. Sister Megan did an incredible presentation on this using the cosmos. You go from us to the Dominican Sisters Grand Rapids, to the Dominican Alliance, Midwest congregations in the U.S., to the Dominican Sisters Conference, United States Dominican congregations, to the Dominican Sisters International Dominican congregations, to the UISG. I skipped one in between, I'll come back to that. The international, there's a meeting every 3 years, 800 different congregations from around the world come, and they talk about their ministry and the needs of the world and how the gospel is being preached. The one I skipped was the LCWR, the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, which is a conference that serves the leaders of congregations in the United States. I had the privilege of serving in the presidency for 3 years. And again, so much learning, so many encounters. But some of the very special things, besides last Sunday's baseball, or Monday's baseball game in Detroit, where there was a thank you sign up on the scoreboard, I got to go to Rome 3 times in delivering our conference report to the Vatican, meeting with a dozen different Vatican departments called dicasteries, telling them the story of women religious in the United States and what we're about. And I had an audience with Pope Francis, and I have met Cardinal Prevost, now Pope Leo, twice. That's pretty exciting when you come from little old Grand Rapids. So again, we see from where we stand. I've stood in some far-flung places. I hope I'm seeing a bit more clearly. Lastly, this Ireland piece that I just came from, which some of you have read about, I had a program called Antarctic. The word means threshold in Gaelic or Irish. And it was about women and men taking a time out from life, the life of work, and having a sabbatical. And it was really the intersection of a lot of themes around the care for creation. So we had theology updates. We studied the story of the creation of the universe. I'm 13.8 billion years old, and so are all of you, because we came from that impulse. We studied geology and plants. We spent hours out in nature, and the Irish Sea was 5 minutes from where I lived for 10 weeks. So that was an experience to really begin to think about my life, think about what might be next, have some attention to self-care, and come back renewed for ministry. And so if we want to go one more time to that theme of call, then I was called to Aquinas College, and they had the freedom to say, I don't know that I have everything I need to do this work, but I'm being called and I'll say yes. And now I'm here to work with you in doing this ministry. So back to my little quotes that I like so much. I noted earlier that as I approach looking back on the story of my life, I see maybe I can surrender to some things. Maybe I can find my place now in this part of the journey. Maybe the titles I could choose for my life would be a book called This is Happiness or It's a Wonderful Life. One other quote from the book, This is Happiness, a really brief one, I'm going to invite you to listen to as you review your own story. I didn't know there are times in a life that pass but retain a gleaming, which means they never die, and the light of them is in you still. So whether you're 18 or 22 or way beyond that, think about your life. What is it that a time has passed, but it retains a gleaming? It's not going away. It's formed who you are today, and it will form who you'll become. And that light is still in you. So remember those themes of invitation, encouragement, challenge, opportunity, and grace. I think we've started a new quest together today. May all your travels through your story, through our story, through history, through her story, be blessed with these themes and more, guided by the light that is in you. Thank you for your attention.